Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we'll be building a Kanban board. As you can see, I'll give you a demo of what we'll be building by the end of the video. So we'll be able to add columns. We'll be able to add tasks. We'll be able to delete tasks. We'll be able to delete columns. We'll be able to drag and drop the task to different columns. So this is what we'll be building by the end of this video. We come to VS Code. Let me show you basic markup. It's somewhat similar to what I have been doing in this whole playlist series. So I have a div tag which is going to be referencing the Kanban board. This is going to be used in the index.js file. In here, we are going to pass a container which is going to be Kanban board, and I'll be instantiating a class called Kanban through it. Have some basic styles, and we'll be doing somewhat like a component structure, like how we normally do any kind of front-end applications. So there'll be different components which will need it. Let me first create the components as such, what we'll be needing. So the first will be like an overlay component, which is going to be for the overlay, which has allowed us to create the columns as well as the task. The second would be column. We are going to create, it should be again if, then we are going to create one more folder which is going to be for the Kanban. And each of these components are going to have their own styles as well as JavaScript files. So let me write them as well. Now, before proceeding further, let me import them as well using the import syntax. This is it now. So for the Kanban.js, now let me walk you through some of the things which we'll be needing. First of all, I'll be doing the services, and let me explain the code. We'll be having a local storage where we'll be basically be putting the key. This is going to be the Kanban board. And we'll be getting the data, which is got nothing going to be but the columns. We'll basically be giving the key to the local storage and getting it. And I have basically converted this to a stringified empty array so that I can get the columns and I can pass it in one shot and send it back. Similarly, when we are saving the columns, we would like to save it in JSON stringified. That function also I've written it. And here, as you can see, this is called JSDoc. I think I've already discussed in my previous video in to-do list, but let me clarify one more. Instead of using TypeScript in our vanilla JavaScript project, and it's quite common also in GitHub projects as well, or you can say open source projects, we have JSDoc comment or some variation of comments like this. So what happens here? Let me explain it. We are basically telling it that we want a type called task, which is going to be a type of object. Which is going to have basically a task ID property as well as a content. Task ID is going to be a number, and content is going to be a string. Similarly, again we have declared one more type, which is going to be going to be called column, and it's of a type of object, which is again going to have properties like column ID, title, task, respectively. And a task is going to be a property of task. We can reference internally like this. So column can have tasks, as you can see, it's highlighting automatically. So when this function is called get columns, at that point of time, it's going to be return as column so that we can get some highlighting and auto completion from VS Code itself. If we talk about API.js, here basically I'm calling the storage and I'm basically creating columns array where I'm basically whenever this function get columns is called from anyone in our function is going to be called in the Kanban.js itself. We're going to get a storage and get columns is going to assign the value to columns and we can return the columns itself. Similarly, so save columns also will basically when the columns are sent, we'll be calling the save columns functional storage. The way I've done it this in this way is like if you have watched my previous video, I've done something similar there also. So if you would like to extend this project, you can use IndexedDB also to extend this project. So that's why I've kept this kind of structure. So I think this is a basic structure of API, and we'll be basically first of all we'll be writing the API because this is going to be used for the applications. So let me first of all write the function definition, then we'll write the function bodies itself. As you can see, we have the function declarations, definition you can say. Now you can start writing the logic for all of them. So add column is going to basically allow us to create a new column. So we are going to take a title and I'll be calling a function called generate ID from utils.js. And by the way, if I've not explained this, this function, there are going to be two functions mainly we'll be using it. One is going to be the get element from HTML. This is going to basically take the HTML and it's going to return as a DOM node using the HTML. I'm not trying to explain it in a lot more detail because I've already done in my previous videos. And for generate ID is going to give us a random ID. So that's what we'll be using throughout the whole project. So let me import. I'm not sure why it's not coming up. And it's very important. You have to have JS here. If suppose for some reason VS Code doesn't put, you have to add it because we don't have any kind of bundlers here involved. So what I've done is like I've created a column which follows a specific structure. Like we need the ID, we need a title, as well as task by default is going to be empty for a new column. We're going to basically append it to the columns array, which we are modifying here. And we're basically saving it also so that it gets persisted. And if you refresh it again, we'll be able to have those columns from taken from local storage. As a name said, delete column is basically going to take the column ID. And what I'm doing is I'm basically mapping the columns, not mapping, sorry, it should be filter. I'm basically running the filter function. And if the column ID doesn't match the column which we passed, then I'm going to return the new columns which I'm reassigning back to the columns array variable. And again, I'm saving the columns to local storage. This is going to be common, the save columns to be called because whenever we are modifying the any state, we would like that to be persisted in local storage so that whenever we refresh, we can get back all our data back. So now for the get tasks. For the get task, we are basically going to find the column based on the column ID. We're going to find with the column, respective column. If the column is not there, then we are just going to return empty array because it's a new column. Then the get task is going to be empty array. It's just for HK scenarios, handling them. And if we have if we find the column data, then we're going to return a task. Now for that task, sorry about that. I think this should be column ID itself. If you were confused previously, The new column is going to have column ID. So let me walk you through if you've not understood. So we have a task, and basically task ID is going to get the ID, and it's going to again get a content also. And the columns, what we'll do is basically we're gonna run map to the function, to the array, over there basically, and we're going to check if the column ID matches the column ID which has been passed. That means we are on the we're in the correct column, and in that point of time, we would like to return an object. We're going to basically take all the column data. It's not necessary. You could have put just the title, I guess, but I'm trying to make it more. If you are planning to make it more extendable, that's why I'm doing this way. So I'm going to basically spread the column, and I'm going to take the task and just got to get a column dot task as well as append a new task to it, and just return that new array. And otherwise, if this column dot column ID doesn't match, if it's a normal column, I'm just going to return it. That's it. Just a basic map function. I've run it. Again, I'm going to run the save columns, and I'm going to return new task. For delete task, let me copy whatever we already have, and let me just modify it. The task is going to be a new array. We're going to filter out the task. Let me add the code. This is it. So basically, we're going to remove the task whichever matches it. We're going to get the task ID, and when on the specific column, we're going to basically remove the task ID. I think I missed it out. It should be column.task. And then this, I think this should be okay. Now for the update task position, this is going to keep track of when we basically, this function needs to do a couple of things, mainly two things. First is going to get the task, which is going to which will be getting by using the task ID. After getting the task, we need to remove the task from the existing column. And after removing from the existing column, we need to place it in a new column, which will be getting by the new column ID at the specific position, which we'll be getting from new position. This has to do two things. One is it has to find a task and remove it from its current location. Next, we need to add it to the new location. So for that, let me write some of the function code. To do that, to do first point, we need to basically iterate to the array. Let me write a code for it and then I explain it. It'll become more clear. So what I'm doing is like I'm basically iterating through the array of columns. I'm finding a column. I'm just checking whether a task is there or not. If the column.task has this task ID, then this task will be there. If it is there, I'm gonna write the logic in here. And if when we find a task, We need to break it also. Break this because the task is going to be only present in one column, so we don't need to write the logic, continue the logic for other columns. So we need to basically add the existing column also as a column ID. Yeah, before proceeding further, I think it's better to have some different name for a task. Let me write current task. Existing column is going to be the column which is currently we are at. Current task is going to be the task. Let me declare it another variable. The task, if the task is there, then we are going to basically assign a task and current task will going to become the task. Then we are just going to copy paste the logic which you already had for replacing something. I think so. It should be here, I guess. Delete task here. We copy this code. So we are going to again iterate to the array and we're going to take the task and for this column ID, instead of using just the column ID, I'll be using the existing column.column ID. It's somewhat similar. We are basically iterating to the whole array and checking if the existing column is equal to it. If it is, then we're going to basically remove that task out of it. And task ID should be equal to this, I guess. Task.task ID is not equal to task ID. If you're getting confused with task ID, you can use current task also. It doesn't matter much. So now we have basically removed it from its current location. Now we need to take it and place it in another location. So for that, we need to again do the map, columns.map. Again, the code is quite naive in way. I'm not checking the time complexity as such, so you can ignore that for now. You can make it more optimum if you're interested. So basically, we have the columns, and we are going to have basically iterate again to the columns. This code also, I think we can somewhat copy it. It's from add columns, I guess. Yeah, here I can just copy this code. I can copy the save columns part also. So let me paste it. If the column is equal to new column ID, and if we have a current task, just an extra check I'm doing, then we are going to basically, first of all, we're going to take the column dot tasks dot push. Yeah, instead of pushing, I need to do splice. For splice, I'll be doing new position. I'll be just be replacing it, so I'll be doing 0 as well as the current task. So this should work fine. Now for a task, what we have to do is like while sending it back, I'll do column dot tasks. This should work fine, but if you really want, you can do a slice and get a different copy of it. I just ignore it. I think it should work fine. So we have the column map as well as task, and I think this should be enough for us, this whole API JS, and we'll be using it throughout our whole application now. Now, basically, we'll be adding the Kanban class. So let me go there. And before that, I have went ahead and copied some of the things which will be using throughout the this video basically in this application. So since we are not using TypeScript and I don't want to have some weird typing issues, string typos, so I'll be using something like an object. Wherever it's required, I'll be using this add column to reference this add column strings, etc. So that was I wanted to let you know. And now we can come back here. Let me create the class. Uh, I think in this project, at least, I'll not be using a lot from the user config. So hence, like how I've done my previous video, I'm not doing that something like that similar. Like I'm not planning to take the user config and the default config and merge it together. I'll just be taking the config as it is. Then I'll be calling the create Kanban function. In this function, basically, I'll first check whether the container is there or not. And if the container is not there, we're going to return. So now we're going to create a fragment. We're gonna get the columns from the API. This is the correct place, I think so. Yeah, we're gonna get the columns and we need to have JS here. For each column, we're gonna call, basically gonna instantiate a class called class column. So I'll be creating that later, but just for now, you can just take it like this. We need to pass it a couple of things. One is gonna be the column ID. Then the other is gonna be, as you see, can see VS Code is smart enough because I'm using get columns and get columns returns me the columns. That's a VS Code is able to predict what is gonna be the inside it. But anyway, let me just add a title to it. I'll be creating a DOM element later on. Don't worry about that. So after that, we need to basically append to the fragment. Now, like I showed you in demo, we'll be having a plus button, which is going to be responsible for adding a column. So I'll be creating that now. So what I've done is I've created a button. I've given a text content of plus as well as I've added a class of add column. Then post that I went ahead and created an event listener for the add column button click basically. And I'll create this function also here somewhere. I'm also binding it. I think I've already explained in my previous videos, so I'm not going much in details there. But after that, we are basically appending to the add column. Now we need to also create the overlay element. We'll be again creating class later on. The overlay element is going to basically overlay class is, and the instantiation of the basically the overlay element when we instantiate, we need to pass it the container as well as the add element button, add column button. It's going to be required, and we need to add it also. This is also going to have the DOM element later on. Don't worry about that. No, I think wait a second. I think I'll just be appending to the container itself. Fragment. And for the overlay element, what I'll do is like, since I want the overlay element to always be in focus, like, hence what I'll do is like, instead of appending to the container, I'll be appending to the parent of the container so that wherever we're using this Kanban board, it's going to always be at the parent level of the Kanban. In this case, it's going to be body. Let me be clear here. Like, I would like to append to the body, but we can basically take this div Kanban or somewhere, something else we can create some other structure like that. So hence I'll be trying to make it more generic. So I'll be using parent element here. It's going to be container. This is going to basically append the overlay element to the container. This is mainly for styling purpose and That's it, I guess. You can try it. If you're getting confused, you can just try it adding into the containers. You'll realize why I've done that anyway. So I think this should be it. For the container also, we need to basically handle the event listener. I'll be calling it add task, and I'll be writing the logic for both add column and add task later on. So this is it for the Kanban.js file. So now we need to go to column.js. So let me add a class. This is going to be basically, we're going to anyway follow this column ID title. This is going to call, this is going to have a DOM element like I showed you previously. The DOM element is going to be basically be using something called get element. I'll just paste the markup here. I'll just import a couple of things. One is the utils.js, other is the types, as well as the actions. And we need to have the column ID also. And it's going to basically call the get element. We need to pass the column ID. This is it. I just went and copy pasted it. Let me explain it how as when we go. So basically, what it'll have the column is going to basically have this markup. The main div tag is going to have a type of column. This is going to be used to identify which div element has been interacted with by the user. We also going to have a column ID which will let us know which is the whether this is the column ID. These will become very much clear when I use them throughout other places. Other than that, we are going to have a column header as well as a UL class task. This is going to contain basically you can say our tasks, obviously. And for the button is going to have again a button as well. It will have the column ID as well as the button add. This is going to be responsible for adding tasks to our column. And this is going to be responsible for adding, oh, sorry, it's going to be responsible for deleting our columns. So we'll be needing this task container also. So I'll just add that now itself. This is again coming up from, I think, here as you can see element. We just going to understand that's why we're able to get the highlight here. So the query selector I'll be using tasks because this is the task here. And then I'll call this.init. I'll pass it column ID, but I need to pass a title also. The title is going to be used in the get element function here, I guess. So I'll be calling the init now with a column ID. This in turn is going to call other methods. One is going to be setup listeners, another is going to be render tasks. Setup listeners, I'll be coming back to it later. Just let me put this dot. Let me copy both of them. For render task, I'll be needing a column ID. So what I'll do is like render task is going to basically render the task, obviously. So what we need to do is like we need to first create a fragment. Then we need to basically for each of these columns task first we need to get a tasks, and this is going to basically again we need to import we need to add .js here, and get task will need a column ID as you can see. So I'll pass it to it dot for each. Not sure. Okay, anyway, for each task, we're gonna basically create a new task. The new task is gonna have column ID, task dot, I think it was what, I'm forgetting what was the task has to return. I think it was in local storage. It's gonna have content, task ID as well as content. So I'll pass the task ID as well as the content. This is gonna be just DOM element again, like how we are doing for others. Then I'll append it to the fragment. Post that after everything has been rendered, then I'll append to a DOM element, the fragment. So let me do one thing. I'll just put the get elements on the top. So we'll be coming back to setup later on. First of all, now we can come to task.js now. So let me create the task. And this is also going to have something similar like how we have. So I've already went ahead and copied the markup. Let me import all of this, types as well as actions. Again, I have to do utils.js. So constructor is going to have basically this structure, column ID, task ID, content. Let me just copy this. Oh, I think I have noticed it now. It should be task container. Basically, we are going to append the task to the task container, not to the DOM element itself, like I told you previously. Anyway, we can come to task. This should be task ID, task as well as this should be content. We need to add this dot DOM element, and we need to pass all of this to it. This is it. It should work fine. Now we need to import all of this. So for the task, we need to come here and import it. For Kanban also, we need to come and import it. Column ID title is okay. I'm just verifying it. Yeah, everything is fine. Now for task also, column ID, task ID, content. You can go ahead and add extra annotation, basically JSDoc comments if you are interested, but I'll just keep it simple. So we have the task, we have the column, and for the column now, what we can do is like we can come and handle the setup listeners. So what we will do is like the column, each column is going to be, there are a couple of ways to going about it. We can go and handle each task is, let me just come and give you the, give an overview of the markup, what we have. So each task is basically going to have a data type of task, the main parent div, or sorry, li tag. Inside of we'll be having the content for each of the task, as well as it will have a delete button, which is going to delete the specific button or a task. So now what we can do is like there are a couple of ways we can do. One, we can for each task we can have an event listener, which is going to listen for the events or for the basically delete action events. This is going to make it easy in one way for the writing the code, but we are going to have event listen for all of the tasks, which if you think might be unnecessary, because what we can do is like we can listen on the column.js. It's basically in the column level. We can listen for all of the events. We can listen for this event delete column as well as add task as well as the task, basically this task as well. So we can listen for all of them. The handling of the logic of two of them will be done in the setup listeners, but for a task, we'll be doing it handling of it in the kanban.js file, basically in the Kanban level. Why? Because see, when you add a task, when you click on, let me just come back here. When you click on the add task, no, sorry, not this one. Delete task is going to be handled in column for column.js. Yeah, this. When you basically add task, at that point of time, what will happen is like on the Kanban level, we'll be listening it because we need, whenever user clicks on the add task button, the overlay has to be shown and user is going to type the content inside it. And based on that, after the user presses the add button in the overlay, which will be adding later on just now, don't worry about that. But when we add the button, it's gonna that time the Kanban needs to basically tell the overlay. So Canva is gonna be responsible for communicating into to overlay. Hence, we are basically gonna listen for the add task in the Kanban level. But for others like delete column as well as delete task will be handled itself in the column level. So hence we can write the logic for that now. Now let me just get them. First will be what task ID. These I'm gonna get from dataset attributes. Other than that, I'll be getting the action also. No, I'll be getting column ID from both of them because task is like the button. This one is gonna have the column ID. Task also is gonna have this. Where is it? Delete this one column ID. So I'll be getting a column ID instead of task ID. So let me add column ID for both of them. And action is gonna allow us to know which was the action. So as you can see in here, action is delete column for this button, as well as for the task one, it is delete task. So I'll be having action again, something similar. So let me write that. And if for some reason we don't have column ID or task, we just return. Now we need to handle both of the scenarios like I told previously. One is going to be the delete action task. Other is going to be the delete column. To delete task, we need to again take the task ID also. As you can see, it is there here. So I'll again do something similar like this. And again, something similar I'll do. I'll just check whether task ID is there or not. If it's not, I'll just return to handle edge case scenarios. But if it is there, I'll first get a text content out of it. So as you can see in the task, the previous element has a text content. So I'll be targeting this. I think it's previous element sibling dot value. This is going to give us the content as you can see here. And we can use that in our task to basically ask user for confirmation. I'll just write task maybe. If the user says yes, or basically gives us a positive response, then we're going to delete the task. And lead task will require column ID, which we already have, as well as the task ID, which we already again have. After this, now we have basically removed it from our state. Now we need to remove it from the UI as well. So to do that, what we can do is like we can basically remove it from the li tag. We can target and we can remove this li tag together. So to do that, we'll just say e dot target dot parent element dot remove. This is going to basically remove the li tag in one way. By the way, I think it should be text content. I think value is also okay maybe. I'll just give text content. Suppose that I'll just copy whatever we already done. Have done this one. We just say, are you sure you want to delete column? We need to get the column something similar way. Basically, this delete column is going to be triggered from here. As you can see, delete column, and it's going to have the previous element as the title. So I'm using that. Where is it? And if it is a positive, then we'll just write delete column. And this will only take the column ID, I guess. Yeah. So the when something similar like we'll be doing here, so suppose we have this button, we need to target this div tag. So what I'll do is like buttons, parent elements, parent element. So I'll remove that. Hence, I'll just copy this. It's already there. I'll just add this one more. Now this should work fine, I guess. And nothing I've missed out in the column.js file. So now we can come to Kanban now. Let me just verify once more. Yeah. In the Kanban now we need to write a logic for adding the column as well as the adding the task. Now we'll be adding for add columns. What we'll do is like we'll be using something called custom events. If you're not aware about custom events, let me give a brief idea about it. Basically, what happens is like browser has own events like click, mouse over, etc. We can by default, we browser basically web APIs gives us the powers to create our own custom events, and we can listen those to those events in other places. So what I'll do is like I'll be using that in this part for DOM element for the overlay element exactly to be precise. I'll be getting a DOM element out of it, and I'll be writing dispatch event something called. This is going to basically allow us to create an event into a new custom event. This is going to take the event name, which is going to be the name. Since it's going to be add column, it's going to be add column event, and we need to give extra. We can pass it extra details. I think it was detail. Yes, I'll be passing it. No, I'll be passing it just the action, which is going to be action dot add column. So the thing is, what will happen is like we are going to basically trigger the overlay element to basically show or hide the overlay element itself, the DOM element which is represented by the overlay class. So to do that, we'll basically for the function add column, we are going to basically send the action which is going to be add column, and for the add task, we need to do a couple of more things. We need to send the action. First of all, we need to change the event. It's going to be add task event. For the action, again, we need to have add task. We'll be also sending column ID. This anyway we are gonna get because see, as you can see, contain is gonna listen for add event listener is gonna call add task. So we'll be getting it from our like we just need to copy this code basically. If you're getting confused, and we have to check whether the action, if the action is not equal to actions dot add task. Like I think it's quite clear, but let me clarify. The delete column, like I told previously, the add delete column as well as the delete. These two are going to be handled. Delete column, delete task will be handled at the column level. The add task is going to be handled at the Kanban level. So that's why we're checking whether the action is only the add task. If it is only the add task, then we'll proceed. Others will go, will just ignore this. I can check for the column also. If the column ID is not there, then also I have to return because I need the column ID in the overlay element. So I think this should work fine for now. So we'll be coming back again for adding the drag and drop functionality, but for now it's okay. So we can come to column.js now, not column, it should be overlay element. So let me add the class now. This is gonna contain, this is gonna basically get from Kanban container as well as add column button. So I'll again be using some of the pre markup. So let me just import get element from HTML. This needs to be .js. I'll be getting a DOM element from it. I'll be needing a couple of things. One will be the input as well as the button. So I'll be doing that also. You can just select input itself. Similarly for add button, this input element and add button, we are basically taking it from here. Basically getting the reference because it's going to be required other places. Then also we need something called action and column ID. This is because we'll be getting these from the column from the dispatch events. So we need to have a reference for them also. Because based on these, we'll be performing the respective actions. It will become clear while I write a code. And we need to basically reassign container and add column. Let me just both of them in one place. Let me call the this dot init, or I can say this dot setup listeners. So let me type it out. So like I told you previously, we are going to listen for these events. So let me have them. For the add column event, we'll be basically be getting just the action. We can destructure it from e.detail, like here. We're passing it from detail, we can destructure it from there. And we can just set it this dot action equal to action. And we'll be calling one function called toggle overlay. Or you can say just toggle, whatever you want. I'll just write toggle overlay. This is going to basically swap the one class which is going to be by default. What will happen is like I'll be adding the styles later on, but by default overlay is going to be not shown using display none. Basically, we are going to use CSS to not show the element. But whenever we call toggle overlay, is going to basically put a class of flex so that it gets shown, and that's what we'll be doing. Let me add it now itself. This is going to basically toggle the class later on. Again, similarly, we'll be doing something for task also. This is going to have the column ID as well. This again going to swap it. And whenever this button, add button, gets triggered, we'll be basically checking whether the action was. Let me just write the code. Let me become clear. So what will happen? Let me clarify the flow. What will happen is like when from the start, I guess. Maybe let me take the example add task. What will happen is whenever add task gets triggered, the Kanban is going to listen for it. And whenever it gets listen, it's going to come to add task. It's going to basically dispatch an event which is going to be this add task event. And the overlay is going to listen for the add task event. And it's going to basically destructure the values like action column ID. It's going to set it. After it's gonna basically toggle the overlay and basically gonna show us the overlay element, and the user is gonna type the elements in the input box as well as click on the button. When the user clicks on a button, we are handling an event listener here. We are check basically we are handling the click listener. We're checking if the action is the actions.add column. Why? Because we have already done that here, as you can see. Like just in add task, we already have the action as what is it? Add task. So we'll be checking again the task. If the task is add task, then we're going to basically call a function called add task, and something similar we'll be doing for add column as well. So let me add a function for that. We need to also have the event listeners. So we need to just pass event. So what we'll do is like first of all we'll be checking, we'll be getting the value using the input element dot value dot trim to just remove unnecessary spaces. After that we'll just create a column using new add column function. I think this should not be called, it should be add column services. And then we need to just pass the value. Should give us a new column, and this was in the state. Now we need to basically show in the UI also a new column. So we'll be adding new column. We need to pass the column ID. This is going to be new dot column ID. We need to also pass the title. So we'll be getting a new column element, and what we do need to do is like we need to basically insert it before the add column button which you are getting. Instead of this, I'll just write DOM element. Then I write this dot container dot insert before. I'll be passing new column element. Then I need to pass the add column button. This should basically show it in the UI also now. So we're basically sending, we would like the new column to be inserted before the add column button. And then we just need to call the e dot target, no, not e dot target, but input element dot value equal to empty string. So that we basically after the user has typed and added the column, we just need to clear it. So from next time onwards, again, come a clean slate. Then we need to just call the toggle overlay again. Something similar needs to be done for a task also. We'll be getting the call value. We'll be getting a new task. We just create task. This will need a column ID, which you already have, as well as the content, which is going to be the value. Then we need to again create a task. This will have a column ID, again a task ID, which is going to be coming from task dot task ID. Then we need to pass the content. So we'll be getting a DOM element again. Now what we have to do is like we need to also get the column that's selected column equal to container dot query selected. We need to find a column. So to do that, what we can do is like we can use the CSS, I think attribute selector. We need to find the column. So we need to come here to column.js. We can find it using data hyphen column ID. This is going to be equal to the column ID, and we already have it. I need to do it. This is going to give us a selected column. Now what we do is like we need to basically append it to it. Selected column dot, I think this selected column dot DOM element. Let me check it once. The column has something called task container. We can basically append it to that, the new task element. So we'll be getting the selected column, which is going to be of using data column ID this. We'll be basically having the task container as part of it, and we'll be appending the new task element to that, and then the same thing which we have already done, just copy paste. So this should work fine now. Now let me add the styles also then so that we can see the whole functionality. Then we can come back to drag and drop function. Then we can basically come and add the drag and drop functionality later. Ahead and added the stylings. The main styling which we should focus on is the flex one. As you can see, display flex. By default, add task is gonna have as none, and then it can become flex. That's was the mean. Other than that, some basic styles I've used. You can check it out later on. Now let us see what happens whether everything works fine or not. Let me just go live. Close everything. Let's see what is the issues. First is column. I think this is into issue with Kanban JS. Let me see. Where is column? Okay, here I guess. Then let's see if any other issues. Let me refresh. Hold is not defined. Yeah, I forgot to import it. Let me come here. It should be in Kanban overlay. Yeah, save JS. Yeah, it's there. Okay, somewhere. Okay, I understood the issue. Let me go to overlay again. As I told you, you need to have JS here. That column event is not defined. Let me just be on a safe side and just import everything. This should work fine now. Okay, now it works fine. Let's see application we have something or not. Let me create everything from my storage. Todo. Let's see if it works or not. I'm already seeing an error, but at least a column got entered, but he is not defined. Add task. Kanban.js. This will need the E because we need it. Add column doesn't need it. I'll just add it and keep it. Refresh. Okay, title is not defined now. I think there are a lot of minor issues. Let's refresh. Sorry about this. Column.js. I understood the issue. It's about a target. I think I did a very serious mistake here. This should be event listeners. Basically, what we need to do, we need to check for the column like I told previously that time. Maybe check the DOM element dot add event listener on click. Need to basically have this logic. So whenever a click happens, it's gonna come here and it's gonna check. Let us start fixing the issues one by one, I guess. So one was the in the old layer as well. We need to have this here. Again, we need to basically this is there. For the new column also, I think I missed out previously. It should be like it should also return the new column because we'll be using that in our column.js, I guess. At least overlay, I guess. Here we'll be using that. Other than that, for the new column also, I'm passing it column ID title, but for the get element, I'm saying column ID title, but I'm swapping it. Should be wrong. So we need to do this. Paste, save. The fix, we need to do a couple of things. We need to first cut this, paste it here, put quotes around the column ID. One more issue is with regards to overlay itself, I need to do query selector, not task, because we're basically getting the selected column. It's not a this is not an instance of a class, so we will not be able to access task container here. So that's why I need to basically come back like how I have for task here. Something I have to do here. So again, I need to query selector dot task, paste it, save, refresh, add task 5. This is working fine now. Let's try to see if delete works or not. Are you sure to delete task 1? Yes, deleted. Task 2, yes, deleted. Now let us try to delete also. Okay, this is also working fine. So now we can add task, we can add columns, we can delete tasks, we can delete columns. So now we can finally go to drag and drop section. So for that, let me just come back here. Most of the logic of a drag and drop will be on Kanban JS. So here we need to basically listen for a couple of events. Let me add them. First will be drag start. Then it will be drag over. Then it will be drag end. Last it will be drop. If you'd like to go more into details about how everything works, then you can check out ambient docs. It's quite good. But for just for this application, you can think is drag start is basically when we start dragging the element, and drag over is basically when the element is being dragged. We'll be just be let's doing the we'll be preventing default behavior here. We'll not be doing anything else specific here. Then drag end is basically when the drag event has stopped. Basically, the dragging has stopped, and drop is basically when we drop the element on the uh, container. For us, it's going to be the task place. We would like the dropping to only happen in the tasks. So for that, we'll be doing some extra checks. But other than that, let me see. I think I missed out something, but I don't think so. Okay, anyway, we'll see if anything works. So let us write. And by the way, like for anything to be allowed to be dragged in the DOM, we need to, in the browser basically, we need to very specifically we can do it. So in the task, that's why in the top, as you can see, we have put draggable equal to. That's important, otherwise it's not going to work properly. So now we can come back to here and just write the functions on drag start, on drag end, on drop. So for on drag start, what we'll do is like we'll be basically be setting some other things. E dot target or data transfer to be e dot data transfer dot set data text plain. We'll basically be sending the so whenever we're basically dragging a task, we would like to tell the task container or the element where it's going to be dropped. We would like to send it some data. In our case, it's going to be something called task ID because we'll be needing the task ID to update the position because basically we'll be calling this function as you might have guessed, I guess, the update task position. This will require a task ID, so hence you're sending that. Other than that, we need to basically add a class also. What I've done is like in the Kanban styles, whenever basically we're dragging, we'll be adding this is dragging class. It's going to help us in a couple of ways. One is to basically give some styling. Other than that, we'll be able to identify in our container which element is exactly dragging for some specific function code which we'll be adding later. For on drag end, basically we'll be removing it. I think that should be it. Now for the on drop, we'll be first checking if the e dot target dot class list dot contains, it should contain basically, where is it? Tasks. So we would like, the thing is like some weird behavior can happen if you're not gonna check which, see the drop, basically we can drop in some other places also, and it might cause some weird behavior. So hence we will be checking whether the task, whether where the, basically where we are dropping this task, is it a task container or not? We'll be checking that using this line. If it doesn't contain tasks, then we are just gonna return. We need to also prevent a default behavior. Let me write it, e.prevent default. We'll be able to get the task container, which is going to be the e.target. Then we need the closest column, which we can find using something called task container.closest. We'll basically pass the selector here. We'll be checking the selector for this. Basically, we have data type, we got types.column. We'll be checking for this. Types.column. And we'll be getting the column ID from this. Let me wrap it and get it a number value. And we already have passed the task ID, so we can get that also. Data transfer dot get data text slash plain. So we now have the column ID as well as the task ID. So let me first give you a demo so it becomes very clear. In the demo which I've shown you, the thing is like you can have two scenarios mainly. One is like if you're trying to drag an element either to the end of the element, or otherwise you're trying to drag an element to suppose the beginning or maybe on the start. It doesn't matter much. So let me just show it here. Just walking. Yeah. So there are two scenarios we are going to handle. One is at the end, and the other is the walking at the top, sorry, or at the begin. There are only two scenarios. One is going to be the at the end of the task container, other is going to be at between anywhere else. So that's how we're going to write the logic now. So I'll be calling a function. I'll be coming back to explain the function later on. It's going to be quite complicated. So let me show you visually. But for now, you can imagine like this function is going to give us a couple of things. One is going to be the, we call this. So this function is going to take two things. One is going to be the task, and the other is going to be the mouse swipe position of our cursor. So we'll be getting the mouse for the task. We need to call task equal to closest column. Or let me just write column here. And the column dot query selector. Basically, we're going to get all the tasks which are present inside this column, and we'll be passing that to the insert above function as well as the client y, which is going to represent our mouse cursor position. So for the closest task, what will happen is like suppose there are two scenarios like I told you previously. One is going to be at the end of the list, and the other is going to be at the between of the list. So suppose we get at if suppose if you don't get any task, that means we're at the end of the list. And if we're at the end of the list, we just need to call task container dot append child this task, which is nothing but for a task also we need to get it now. So let me just add it also. Task equal to container. Like I told you previously, we'll be using the dragging class to identify which element is dragging. So I'll be using that. is dragging to find the task which we're dragging currently, and we're gonna append the task to task container. And we also update position, we call that. This is gonna take the task ID, current task ID, as well as a new column ID, which is gonna be nothing but this here. Other than that, it's gonna take a new position also. The new position is gonna be this closest index. No, sorry, we don't use a lot of that. The column ID is gonna be this one, but the new position is gonna be the task dot length, because we are going to be appending at the end of the list. But if the task is there for some reason, so what we'll do is like we'll be basically be using something called task container dot insert before, which is going to take the node which you want to add, which is going to be the task. It's going to be before the closest task. And in the update task position, I'll be sending the task ID, the column ID, as well as the closest index. Before proceeding, well, let me just verify if everything is fine. Let me first change this name. I think closest bottom task would be appropriate name, I guess. Closest bottom task. We'll understand why I'm writing this name. Other than that, insert above task should taste task. I'm sending task ID for some reason. And task should be query scripted all, I guess. And let me add it current task or maybe dragging task. Or is task? I think task is okay enough, I guess. Let me first of all give a demo of what we already have. Suppose I try to drag an element. Now let me create one more task. 6. And just try to drag at the start of the list. Just here. Similarly, we can try to drag at the end of the list also. This is the only problem. And when we refresh, it's going to persist. I think there's some issue. Let me come to Kanban JS. Here, most of the logic should be fine. Data type, this needs to be quotes, but I don't think this should be an issue. Let me check update task position. Let me first save this. Update task position will be first getting a task whichever matches the ID. Find task to ID equal. It should be equal. This should match with ID. We can refresh it. Let's see now it works fine, hopefully. We'll first drag it. Refresh. Yeah, as you can see, it's working fine. It's in the correct location even after refreshing. Okay, I think this is working fine. Now we can check out the logic for insert above task. So what happens in the insert above task is like basically what happens is every element has something called is top, bottom, left, which we can get using get bounding client this function basically. This is going to give us the top position. Basically, suppose let me clarify with an example. Suppose this task click has a top of this much value you can say, and the e dot client y which we're passing is going to be basically our cursor position from the top again. So we'll be using something using the offset. We'll be using the offset to basically calculate whichever element is uh, the bottom task, which is the closest one. There can be more tasks which satisfies the condition, but we need to always check the task which is just below one. It's more easier to go with the logic. Let me just drag an element. Let me just go inside it. So we are having a task. This is the first task. The first task will have the top as the cursor of the mouse is suppose when we drop the task for element you can say or task. That time the mouse y was 154 and the top of this task 6 was 83. That means the offset was greater than 0. So we are ignoring this. I will again come back. This time for the second element, task 4. This has mouse y is again 154. Top of this task is 165. Mouse y is 154, it's 165. So as a whole, we'll be getting the offset as less than 0. The offset less than 0 and offset is greater than closer offset, which is minus infinity. Hence, we'll be going to closer offset, closest task, and closest index, and we'll be basically getting it back. and this should basically help us give the result. As you can see, for other tasks also, like for a task 5, as you can see, there also mouse wise 154 and top is 248. That means its offset is also going to be less than 0. Offset is going to be less than 0, but offset is going to be greater in close, is not going to be greater in closer offset. Hence, we are not going to go in this condition because we just wanted the closest element which was just below the task 4. Basically, whichever element we dragged. So hence, this logic works. This logic is somewhat convoluted in one way, but it was the easiest way. Otherwise, there are extra ways you can do adding the closest tag, adding some drop pane in the top and bottom, etc. This I felt was somewhat. If you understand the basic intuition, I think it works very fine. So anyway, I hope it's clear now. So this was the whole end of this whole video, I guess, and hope to see 100 videos as well. And do check out this whole place. I'll be adding more videos as well as we go through. And that's it. And bye.